is the Pegasus Podcast, presented by Night Sports Now. UCF news, views, and a few hot takes. Now, here are your hosts, Bailey Go Knights Adams and Christian Charge On Simmons.
Welcome into episode 262. Be sure you're following us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at ByCASimmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. You can also find us at I messed it up. You can also email us at PegasusPodcastByKSN@gmail.com. There comes a point in life where you're just too busy, and you realize when you're waiting in line with some friends at Epcot on a Saturday morning that you're going to be out of town when you normally record the podcast you've been doing weekly for the last 4 years. So we were like, oh, guess we got to do the podcast on Sunday. So yeah, I just completely, my schedule these days is so all over the place that I forgot, like, oh yeah, wait a minute, what about the podcast? And so here we are on a Sunday afternoon. Christian, how are you?
I'm great. My schedule's so wide open these days that you said, oh my God, wait, I think we have to do the podcast on a Sunday afternoon. And I said, that affects my life in no way whatsoever. So let's do it.
And then we planned to do it on Sunday night. And I texted you about 20 minutes ago and was like, actually, I have about like an hour of time to do it now. You want to do it now? And you're like, yeah, sure. Give me 10 minutes. And
I said, again, I'm doing nothing. So let's go ahead and do it now. Yeah, I think we were in line for like Guardians of the Galaxy, and you just looked at me with a look of horror out of nowhere and were like, I can't do the podcast this week.
So yeah, I was explaining to you how much I had going on, and I was like, well, yeah, I come back after, because I drove up to Epcot yesterday morning, and I told you, obviously, you knew I was driving back after, and I have two different things going on today, and then I was like, Monday morning, I leave for West Palm Beach for the NFL meetings, and then I was like, I'll be gone Monday through Wednesday, then I come back, and then a day later, I'm driving back to Orlando, and we're going to baseball, and then the open scrimmage, and as I'm explaining this to you, I'm like, wait, I leave Monday morning, and I come back Wednesday. So the podcast has to be recorded at some point. That's when we realized, let's do it on Sunday. And here we are.
This remains a top tier operation week in and week out.
It's really just like, hey, when can we jump on and just babble about UCF for about an hour and then post it?
Pretty much.
And that's what this is. But it's actually fun because we have a fun topic to talk about today, because there's actual like things going on this week. UCF had a scrimmage on Saturday, but then they have another one, an open scrimmage coming up this Saturday, which I will be coming to town for. So we figured we'd preview it. We'd talk about some things to watch for. And just as far as a programming note, we're not going to have a post-scrimmage podcast. We'll just save our observations and takeaways for next week's episode. So that's kind of how things will go. But I am just, before we get into all this stuff, I'm just very excited that we'll just get some football to sink our teeth into, I guess.
Yeah, I am too. I've really been hoping to sink my teeth into some football lately, so I'm excited that we'll get to do that. It is interesting because I don't fully know how to prepare for this myself or to help prepare fans for this, because this is kind of brand new. For the entire time we've had this podcast, and really I don't recall any time that UCF, has done something like this in lieu of a spring game. I think they pretty much always had a spring game, unless I'm forgetting something from when I was a wee child. And you kind of know how to prepare for those because it's a little different. It's a little more, especially in recent years, it's a little more showy. It's a little less football. The football had kind of been creeping out of it year by year. It's kind of funny to think about that UCF will not have a spring game this year. And yet there is a very high chance that we and the fans are going to learn more about the team this spring ball than we did last spring ball. Because last spring ball, there were obviously no open practices. And they had the spring game, which was a spring half. Yeah. And the second half was just shenanigans, which was fun, but not educational. And even I don't know. I also just feel like, and we can talk about this a little deeper into the podcast, but we've already seen signs that things feel a little more open as far as what fans and media are allowed to know about the team or see about the team. So we may actually learn some legitimate things this year, or they may stretch for an hour. We just don't know.
So I believe it's 2 hours. What they said when they announced these open scrimmages, that'll be 10:30 in the morning until 12:30 p.m. So do you want to just talk about the structure and vibe of it first and then talk about all the actual stuff?
Yeah, we can do that. That probably makes sense.
That's kind of what is actually really interesting, because we might be getting a look at what could be the new normal for UCF and for college football as a whole, because spring games, as we've talked about on this podcast, are kind of going away. Obviously, the UCF not having a spring game this year and inviting fans out. And we talked about it a few weeks ago. You and I were talking about how will they eventually kind of bring this all together. And we talked about some fan event at the bounce house or whatever. when it goes into if they end up doing the off season in the summer. But yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see how much of it is really just they're going to go out there and scrimmage. People are going to be allowed to watch, or if there's going to be like any fanfare to it. If it's going to feel at all like somewhat of a spring game or not. I kind of almost wonder. I kind of feel like it won't be. I kind of feel like it's just going to be very like just a generic, like everyone's just kind of hanging out watching.
Yeah, I'm super curious how many people come to this because I also think that they've claimed that they were going to limit attendance because of all the construction and things, but I don't know if that's going to happen because I don't think there's ever going to be like a full stadium of people.
Yeah.
But the only frame of reference, which might be a good one that we have for this, was 2021 when we've talked about this recently because of this, but when it was COVID was going on, schools were not allowed to host recruits on campus. So UCF's way around that was to have open practices that fans could attend, and that meant that if you were, a recruit and therefore a fan, you could also come attend to, and that was kind of their way around it. And it was always so funny at the time because UCF really didn't want the fans there, so it was like the bare minimum. I went back and checked our text because I knew they promoted it in some stupid way, and what they would do is like a day or two before they would post on their Instagram story, and it was the only place we posted. Practice is open tomorrow if you care, and that was it. And them doing that, there would be like 2,000 to 3,000 people at them. Like I went to all of them. I literally it's like I don't know if this is just my family stuff. I literally went with my mom and dad. We would go get Starbucks, then we'd sit in the stands and just talk about the team. And I'd bring my little notes and we'd write what was going on, whatever. Like a scout. And really, I was just someone who was bored during COVID. But that was that when they did that, which that's probably not perfectly comparable to this, since that really was just a practice. There was no fanfare whatsoever. They came out, they practiced, people watched, they left. And I don't know. Like, is this like a thing? Like, will the jumbotron be on? Like,
that's what I was wondering.
Sense of, and I'm kind of leaning towards. I could be way wrong because I know UCF is obviously typically pretty good at that type of stuff and probably want to put on a show for their fans. But at the same time, these aren't 2 additional practices UCF is holding to get fans. Like, these are 2 of the very limited number of practices they give their team this spring. So I don't think the staff are going to want to completely sacrifice those for fanfare. I think they want to have a practice.
Right, and that's why I'm a little more hopeful that we'll get to actually watch some real football or some real like drills, even if it's just so they think. Actually, now I'm going back and wondering, did they promote this as an open scrimmage? Right,
no. Not
just an open practice, or what?
I believe I'm going to double check right now. I believe it was promoted as an open practice.
Okay, because I wonder because obviously with a normal practice they'll do the stretching, they'll do like individual drills.
Yeah, I do not think that. Yes, so I just double checked. It's open practice.
Okay.
I don't think that they would. The UCF football is thrilled to announce 2 exciting opportunities for fans to experience the action up close this spring with 2 open practices. Yeah, I don't think they would do scrimmages. I know they did the one for the shareholders, which that was a thing under Gus too that just happened this weekend because scrimmages really are like the big evaluation moment for the coaches, and I feel like they don't want to do that. Although at the same time, though, like playing devil's advocate, if you weren't afraid of giving away a lot, you could argue that opening a scrimmage to the fans would be the best way to evaluate your players because you're giving them a real live stadium environment or at least a smaller version of it. But again, you're giving away a lot. And I know so many coaches are paranoid about all that type of stuff.
Where did I get scrimmage from? Did I just come up with that?
What do you mean?
Like I would just say it's a practice. Will they be scrimmaging? Or did I just make this up?
I don't know what you mean. It's a practice.
I know, but I thought all along for some reason I thought this was like going not to be a 2-hour scrimmage, but I thought like this would be one of their scrimmages. I didn't know if I got that somewhere. If I just made it
as
up. Far
as I know, unless I'm wrong, it is a practice.
Okay, wow. Well then, made that up. But yeah, I think it will be interesting just because there is there's 2 sides of it where there's the obviously no spring game. This is kind of happening in lieu of a spring game, but there's also the fact that we are under complete new regime and Scott Frost in, Gus Malzahn's whole CIA operation out. So that's part of it too, is like, it's going to be different on both fronts. And that's what's going to be so interesting. And especially since it's like, this is the first way that they're doing this. And if it ends up being next year where they also don't have a spring game, like this is just something they do every year. Like, I'm just curious to see how it eventually would evolve or what kind of the baseline is for this whole thing. There's a Saturday open one, and then there's next Friday evening.
Yep.
So
I think it's going to be interesting and it's going to be telling. And one other thing that encourages me, and maybe this is me way reading into things, and this is not the way it'll go, but we talked about CIA Gus. Believed he was the Secretary of Defense while he was at UCF. And it was just always a little ridiculous because, and it wasn't like, I was about to say it wasn't unique to Gus, but like Gus was definitely probably in like the upper 10th percentile or 90, whichever way you're supposed to do that in college football of secrecy. Can't let anything out. It is a nightmare.
I was going to say paranoia.
Paranoia is, it sounds harsh, but paranoia kind of is the right word. It was just this belief that extended in so many directions, not just, oh, fans will see something, but like other teams might send people into the stands to like get information, or if it gets out that this player is here, then his backup will enter the portal, and just lunacy kind of in all directions. Like it was just never, I feel like it's not surprising. And I understand they're paid 7 figures and it's a very high stakes, high pressure job. But like at the end of the day, this is an entertainment product. That's why it exists. And it was very fun to see Gus go to FSU, and FSU, one of the most historically open schools in the country to fans and media, immediately shut that all down, like instantly shut it down. But we've already seen things aren't as open right now as they were in 2016. And I think we pretty much told you that was going to happen because college football is also just genuinely different now than it was in 2016. And UCF also has a higher profile as a program than when they were a group of 5 team coming off an 0-12 year. But, you know, lots and lots and lots of players have been made available to media. All the assistant coaches have been talking, which is a huge departure from Gus. Under Gus, they really limited media access and fan access to assistant coaches. It was like once a year, and even coordinators, they really tried to limit. They'd talk on Sunday nights and that was it. And you've seen more on the content side. UCF has posted a lot of content from practice, interviews with the coaches, interview with Frost, talking with players that we were not seeing things like that under Gus.
Yeah. And that's why I think this is going to be so intriguing, just how it all plays out. And we can kind of get into some of the more football, the football side of things a little bit more. And of course, we're going to start the conversation at quarterback because, I mean, for a team with a million questions, that's going to always be the biggest one. If you don't have a quarterback settled, it doesn't matter how many other questions there are. It's still going to be, that's the topic.
Right.
And I do wonder, and we talked we're almost talking weekly about this, just a little bit of updates that we are getting. And as far as just practice clips, general buzz, people talking, it oddly feels like right now the most people are talking about Taven Jackson and Cam Fancher. Yeah. And the Cam Fancher thing continues to be like a big shock to me that I would have never seen coming, because I don't know, there's just something about, I guess it's the clips of him. He's got a pretty live arm, and I guess that's where a lot of this is coming from. And never would have thought that would have been the case. But this is going to be our first chance to see with our own eyes, in whatever drills or whatever capacity we can, what these guys look like. And I don't know that we'll learn a whole lot, but we'll learn some.
Yeah, I fear we're in for a Twitter extravaganza over quarterback evaluation, because honestly, like we said, they had their scrimmage this past weekend that was open to the shareholders. And obviously that's a smaller group. And even that led to lots of things being out about shareholders offering their opinions. And I don't want to be one of the people who's like, I don't care if the shareholders say. I will take any shred of information I can get my hands on. So yeah. Keep it coming. And I don't know how we're here, but one of the common threads of what a lot of shareholders who were saying was, hey, Fancher looks really good. And I just don't know what to make of this, because that was we talked about on this podcast, and it wasn't necessarily like an uninformed take. It's what we thought the reality was, that Fancher was kind of just a depth ad, that you had to have 4 scholarship quarterbacks. It'd be it would be coaching malpractice to go into the season without multiple scholarship quarterbacks on your roster like that. And I don't know, it went from like, haha, Fancher's in the room, forgot about him, to they start practicing and like some stuff kind of leaks out a little bit and we hear some stuff. And then social media is like, hey, he looks really good in these videos. And now somehow we're coming up on the first practice and we've just had a scrimmage where the shareholders are like, yeah, Fancher has a hell of an arm. I don't know what the hell's going on. I'd love to perceive that information as, ooh, UCF, because I think challenge is good. I don't want to hear that Taven Jackson is just marching to the job and everyone else sucks. You want to hear that it's challenging. But this is a guy who's he's played in 34 career games across 2 different schools, across 4 different seasons. And he's never been that good. I don't think any change of scenery or change of staff takes that level of experience and body of work and suddenly turn it on its head into something really good. I just don't think that's the way this works.
I don't think so either, unless it does. I don't know. I don't know. I don't have any real explanation for it, obviously, until we kind of see it for ourselves. And it's just, I feel like this is already becoming one of the weirder quarterback battles I can remember. Like, I don't know who the real favorite is. I think my favorite, if I had to pick, is still like I would prefer it to be Dylan Risk, but I also feel like he's getting maybe the least buzz. Maybe
Right.
I don't know. Jakari might be a little bit under, but I just it's weird. I don't know. I don't feel overly comfortable with any option, and so I don't. Is there an outcome that I'm going to be like they've got it? This is going to be great. I don't know. It's weird.
Well, I think, unfortunately, I think this is building up to. I could be way wrong, and I hope I am. It feels like this is laying the groundwork for a multi-quarterback season where one guy wins the job and maybe doesn't hold on to it. I don't know. This is a weird quarterback battle in the history of UCF quarterback battles because it's just not. It's weird. It feels a little. It feels like fans don't really know what to make of it, right? Like historically, like fans have really been dug in on different sides, like whether it was the guy we don't talk about anymore, or whether it was Dylan Gabriel versus Brandon Wimbush, which was like the last big one before that. And then in between ones, it's been like Milton was always the clear front runner, or like KJ, obviously that was an open battle, but like fans always had big opinions. Like I remember being back on Twitter in 2019 and it was like, I was in the trenches arguing with people about Wimbush versus Gabriel, whatever. And this one, it's just like all the fans are like everyone on social media, the fan base in general is just kind of like, yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens.
The most I've seen anybody quote unquote dug in is just kind of like, are we supposed to like be on Fancher's side? Like it's just like people are like not even really sure like they want to commit to a favorite. They're just kind of like, oh, is this the direction we're supposed to be, falling in? But
barring
maybe Saturday
crazy,
could change that. I don't know.
And okay, that's actually a really good point you just made. Let's dive into that because I was about to say, barring something crazy happening, I feel like when the announcement hits in August, everyone's just going to be like, oh, I guess that's who it is. But you know what? I'm wrong because you're right. Because if they do this freaking practice, and let's just say as an example, the fans get out there, which I'm almost wondering, like, will they limit what the quarterbacks are doing out there to just not have this? But
they shouldn't because they can't waste a practice.
And they're trying to find their quarterback. But also, devil's advocate, it's March. They have all summer and then fall camp to figure this out. So it's not like two practices. If the quarterbacks aren't doing as much as normal, we'll take them. But if say they do that and they run some drills and whatever, and Fancher is just throwing these beautiful balls and is finding receivers on these incredible passes and just the throwing motion is just amazing and people kind of fall in love with him. I could see that we come out of this practices with UCF Twitter and uniting behind a guy who does that and going, wow, that one practice we were allowed into, he looked really good. So it will now be coaching my practice if he is not named the starter. Like I totally could see that playing out.
I could see that. And now that I think about it again, like you just said, it is only March. They have all summer and fall. Another thing in that direction is they don't want any of these guys to hit the portal.
No.
So maybe they don't like if they're getting the reps to all these guys. I don't think they're gonna want to come out of spring with all of their I don't know the word. With their cards on the table, I guess. They don't want anyone, not even anyone, but they don't even want the players probably to have that much of an indication of like, oh, I don't have a shot here, so I should hit the portal. So maybe maybe you're right that they won't do much quarterback wise, and we won't learn anything, and no one will have a favorite coming out of the weekend.
Because truth be told, because of the number they're at, like if one of the quarterbacks hits the portal after spring, which doesn't feel super off the table, they probably have to go try to get one then.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of, and I know they don't want to go do that. So it's interesting. And I don't know. I think that you're right that it's the name of the game has sort of changed for how staffs, and this kind of transitions into, we were going to talk about first team depth a little bit. Do we just kind of want to get into that? Because this is kind of in a similar realm as I know a lot of fans, and I'm excited too, or to see, because it's so weird for so much of the team, particularly the offense. We really just don't know anything from a depth perspective. Like this isn't just quarterback, it's running back, it's wide receiver, it's offensive line, it's even kind of tight end. It's basically all of them. We just don't really know who's going to start where. And I do want to caution fans that I think we will get some hints. I think we will obviously see some stuff, but I wouldn't expect just first team to go line up out there and us go, oh, okay, that's where everybody is. And it's to the point that you just said, Bailey, that's not hiding it from the fans or being like, we don't want other schools to know what we're going to do. That's schools have had to these last few years adapt to sort of being vague with their own players in spring because of the spring portal window. Because if you're a wide receiver, like say you're Bradell Richardson, and by the end of spring ball, this is a total example. I think Bradell's going to be really good. I hope he's going to be really good. But just say that by the end of spring ball, you realize that you are not going to be starting this year, and it's year 2. It's very obvious to you. The staff never has you running with the first team. you're going to go, I don't think I should stay here. And you will leave. Yeah. And that's what the staff wants to prevent. So I don't think there's really such a thing anymore in college football of staffs really setting any kind of legitimate depth chart by the end of spring ball. I think they know. I think they're in their meeting rooms piecing things together. And I also think it's a balancing act because coaches want to play their best guys together and they want to get reps in for the guys who are going to be on the field at the same time. But that's what fall camp is for. Spring ball is for evaluation and trying to keep as many players happy as possible.
Yeah, and I think there might even be a way to amend like this whole idea of like what to watch for as far as first team and depth chart. And like they might want to be able to do as much as they can to conceal things, but the reality is you're at least going to get a look at who's mixing in.
Yes.
At like there's only so many reps to go around. So you more so maybe than like seeing the first team, you might kind of see who is in the mix to be on the 2 deep or something like that. There's something you can notice as far as how many reps these guys are getting because you really can't evenly distribute the reps between every single player. There are going to be players emerging and you'll kind of get, and I think there might even be, and again, we'll take it probably on the surface and try not to go too far with it, but I think there could be some surprises, especially with the state of this roster. There could be some surprising guys that were like, oh, I didn't really know if he would be, in the mix to start or to be there. And I think, obviously Fancher being one of those guys, but I think that's the case probably at a lot of different positions, especially on offense.
Well, yeah, and you've already seen that a little bit just from some stuff that's been posted on social media and some stuff that we've already heard about. Like UCF brought in like 95 DBs this offseason, and there were a lot of them we talked about and had reasons to be excited for, and we weren't not excited for him, but we didn't spend a huge amount of time on Philip Dunham from FAU, and he's gotten maybe more buzz than any other player at a spring ball at this point for how well he's been doing. And I don't know. It's just little things like that. And you're right. I do want to clarify to make clear that when I say that they don't want to establish a depth chart, I don't mean they're like throwing like non-scholarship guys and mixing them in with like first team to see what happens. I'm talking mostly about first and second team. They're not going to want to, those are going to probably look very fluid. There's probably, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Frost is just like, I haven't coached in a few years. I don't know how this works yet. Let's just set a depth chart and then it'll be hell in a month. But that's more what you're going to see. And you're right. We will absolutely get some hints and we'll see who's cycling in more often than not. And it's going to be interesting. I'm finding myself now that we're here just way more interested in this than the spring game, which we kind of called at the beginning. That's not like a huge shock, but just the spring game had just become so showy. Vanilla. It was very showy and just nothing really happened. It was come in and run some basic plays, get that clock ticking and get out of here without doing anything crazy. And then we'll watch Lee Hunter try to catch a punt and a horse race an orange, and that was kind of it. And Lee Hunter catching a punt was really fun. The horse racing the orange was fun too. I had a good time. I just didn't learn anything. So I just that's what it is. I'm excited to hopefully learn some more from this.
I think these open practices are going to be for the sickos, like us. Like I think that's really what it's going to be. Is like there might not be as much to draw in the more casual fans and the families and stuff like that, but I think the sickos are going to love this stuff, and I'm really excited for it. So
I'm like a kid on Christmas morning excited. Like I'm just so happy because I loved, like probably too much, I loved the 2021 open practices. They were just so fun. Just get out there with some binoculars and hang out. And you did learn a lot. Like that was like, I guess I should have mentioned that too. Like 2021 happened and like part of it was they were just, we'll see what they do for this. They were straight up practicing, but you really did learn a lot about the team and a lot about which guys were going where and who was looking good. And obviously things were a little more like Dylan Gabriel was returning off of 1920. So it wasn't like there was any intrigue at quarterback. It was more just like, dang, Dylan Gabriel's, looks good.
Still good.
That's good. But one thing, I guess I know we kind of roped this into overall structure, but I wanted to talk about, can we talk about vibe a little bit?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. I keep accidentally transitioning us into topics, which maybe is
what I like it.
And maybe I should
kind of wait. It's your podcast too. I don't have to transition us all the time.
Because it's like we're co-hosts, but I just expect I can't do that. Like Bailey should be the one to take us from topic to topic because I feel like I will just derail us into oblivion if I have that responsibility, which I've done before. But
it's fine.
I remember when Frost was the coach and when Heupel was the coach, because that attitude carried in our Heupel. The vibe of the team and the culture of the team was very much the coaches are your buddies. And I think that really helped under Frost. And that's why I'm curious what he's going to do this time around, because I think under Heupel, it didn't work quite as well. A, because they faced more adversity, and I think that doesn't work as well when there's adversity on the table, and B, they had for some reason separated the team into an offense team and a defense team where they didn't talk to or relate to one another and basically had separate head coaches. So it got a little toxic at the end there. I remember some of the stuff that stood out to me with the open practices for Gus's first year is how the coaches talked to the players and what their relationships were. It was a lot more hard ass. It was a lot more of that vibe. I remember one thing that was like a shocking difference at the time was if a player did something stupid, like not like just the talent wasn't there, but like dropped an easy pass or like missed a block or something, they had to drop and do push-ups, and the coach would whistle them over and have them drop and do push-ups. And there was a time where the offense is out there. I think they were simulating fourth down situations, and they subbed out second team offense for first team offense. First team offense goes to the sideline. Gabriel takes his helmet off. One of the receivers takes his helmet off, and Gus gets on his mic and goes, "First team, helmets on if you're on the side of the field at all times." And they all go and put their helmets back on. And it's just little interesting quirks like that where you do sort of see a little bit. And I think for Gus, that was a team that didn't have a lot of discipline yet, so they knew they had to implement that. And I don't know. I'm curious to see what little quirks and little tidbits like that we see from this coaching staff.
That makes me want to talk about the Mac McWilliams clip.
Yes.
You said it to me and I just saw it when I first woke up. That was an excerpt like from something that UCF posted, right?
Yeah, I actually don't know. I saw because Sons of UCF clipped it and posted it. I don't know what original video it came from, but Mac McWilliams was out at the scrimmage. It must have been the scrimmage highlight video or something, and commented on the team. He said that they look way better than last year and that he can definitely see the culture is way different, which was interesting.
He said they look way better than last year. I can definitely tell you that. I was like, oh gosh, which recontextualized a little bit the conversation I had with him at the Senior Bowl. Just because, I don't know, he didn't seem super interested in talking about UCF when I was at the Senior Bowl talking to him. So I'm like, maybe he really just like hated it last year because obviously they were 4-8. He came in for 1 year. The team sucked. And they didn't even play in the position that he's best at. So
I was about to say lockdown defender who they made play 10 yards off the ball all year. I can't believe he wouldn't want to talk about his time at UCF.
Yeah, made him play outside. He's much more comfortable in the slot. Like I saw that clip and I was like, oh, maybe he hated the last coaching staff. But if he gets drafted, he's a UCF guy.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, we're going to claim him, and that's going to be great, even though he was here for a year and probably will never want to talk about it, which I get. You come into a new school, you have no ties to the school, you watch your coach get forced out, and it just is a terrible year. Like, I don't know, it's not probably fun memories, but I do think, and I don't know, I want to, like, douse the flames a little bit of, like, I don't mean this as an insult to Mac McWilliams in any way, but, like, him just saying, yeah, they look better to me I'm not like, oh, good to know, the team is better than last year. Like, you never know, and it's so funny the stories you hear about it. Coaches don't know. When you have a team and it just practices against itself for 6 months, you never know what the hell you actually have until you get out there against another team. I think one of the famous examples of that, which I know I've told the story in this podcast before, so sorry if you've heard it, was Kenneth Walker at Michigan State, who was a Heisman finalist, running back, really, really good, and how Michigan State, because he was a transfer from Wake Forest, so he came in, and Michigan State's coaches were panicking all offseason because they were like, our run defense is atrocious. Like, they were like, this is ridiculous. And then the game started and they start playing other teams and they're like, oh no, we just have like the best running back in the country. Okay, that makes way more sense. And it's just, you just don't know until you actually get out there.
Yeah, and that's kind of trying to tying us back into what we're talking about, maybe guys that are in the mix for the two deep and maybe moving on to a particular position in wide receivers. It's less to me about who like is in the mix for two deep, and I just want to know like who at all is catching passes. Like, who do I get excited about in this group? And we've seen a couple highlights here and there from UCF putting out some content, but I think the wide receiver position might be, outside of quarterback, it kind of goes hand in hand, might be the one that I'm like the most interested in watching, just as far as how these guys go through drills, how, their hands, just everything, speed, all that. I'm curious to see who stands out, if anyone. Hopefully some do, because UCF's going to need a group to be out there, and I hope it's a good group.
Yeah, I think it's very cool that while we're having this conversation, UCF football just posted a 2.5-minute video of wide receivers coach Sean Beckton mic'd up at practice. So very cool that we will not be able to listen to that until after this conversation. I got to tell you, I think Gus Malzahn would have quit before he let a coach get mic'd up for a practice. So little things like that. And they've been running through those, and it's kind of cool to see like UCF content unleashed a little bit too, like getting all these like inside looks at stuff. It's very fun. But anyway, yeah, wide receiver, I've just come to the conclusion before I've seen any of them practice that they're going to have to hit the portal for more wide receivers after spring. And it's not that I think that they don't have anyone good on the roster. It's that you look at the current wide receiver room, And I think we're not at 3 starters. We're at 3 guys who I think have the potential to be Big 12 starters. Like it's Day Farmer, who's still very young and very unproven. Burdell Richardson, who's still very young and very unproven. DJ Black, who you hope. But like, wow, guys, if I had $1 for every time we were excited about a transfer and it didn't pan out, I'd be so rich that the podcast, I'd have things on the walls behind me for my podcast. And then you have like Marcus Burke from Florida, who's just never really been much of anything. So it's just like, I think there's a good chance that you'll get like 1 or 2 of those guys who will be, oh yeah, no, they're a Big 12 level starter for sure, but that's not enough. And I don't know. I don't think there's anything we can see on Saturday where I'm going to go, yeah, I feel good about the wide receivers now.
Probably not. And I'm going to take this in a different direction and say, I can't wait until one player makes one play. And then he's just my guy that I'm like, he's going to be so good. And then he's never going to play. It's going to happen.
You've done that multiple times, but you have a good hit rate. You got really on Greg McCrae, and he ended up being one of the best running backs in school history. And you got really on RJ Harvey really early, and he also ended up being one of the best running backs in school history. So go ahead and let us know which running back you like, and we'll know from that at least. But let's see if you can extend your expertise to wide receiver this offseason.
My wide receiver track record is much worse.
Yes, it is. Shout out Jordan Johnson.
Jordan Johnson, Trent Whittemore. I think I don't know.
Were you big on Trent Whittemore? I don't remember that one as much.
At a certain point, I think I was like, I've referenced this a million times. The only thing that ever got me in on Trent Whittemore is when he transferred in. I looked at like his yards per catch from one season at UF, and he had like 2 big catches. He had like a 21-yard average, and I was like, dude, he might be a big play receiver. That's what we need. And
it would have been so funny if I could have told you in that moment that big play receiver would leave UCF with the nickname Fair Catch Trent.
Yeah. Tough.
Been,
so maybe I'm not good at evaluating wide receivers, but we can.
It will be interesting though. But again,
try it.
This
Saturday.
is the problem. This is the problem of practice, is because if the wide receivers look good, I'll be like, what the hell's wrong with the DBs? Like, it's just that's the nature of this. And it's funny. This is a little not related to UCF, but in college football as a whole, Deion Sanders and Fran Brown, the coaches at Colorado and Syracuse, attempted to play a scrimmage against each other this offseason. And the NCAA, being the haters of fun that they are, denied that request. But interestingly,
why?
Yeah, I read the Athletic Reporter story. I actually agree with the NCAA a little bit. And they were like, their take was like, you can't drop something that if we approve it will completely change the offseason of the sport. And you gave us 8 days notice to talk about if it's a good idea. Like, we're not going to do that. But they have a normal like procedural meeting scheduled, I think, for next month that they do every year. And they said they're going to like discuss it more then. And if they don't see any issues with it, they'll allow it going forward. And if that becomes a rule for next year, I think very quickly everyone is going to adopt that. I think you will see that spread across college football like wildfire, because it's pretty injuries are a risk, but injuries are a risk in intra-squad scrimmages anyway. And that is a incredibly valuable opportunity to evaluate your team against an actual other opponent. And it's actually funny. I didn't realize that rule that you can't do that was only passed in 1992.
Oh,
so it didn't sound like anyone was really doing it before, but like, it's not like some, you're breaking one of the sacred rules of college football if you let teams scrimmage against each other. And I saw, who was it on Twitter? I really hate that I don't have it in front of me. Someone put out the idea of should UCF and USF scrimmage.
Oh, I don't know. I did see that become a little bit of a conversation. I don't remember who put it out though.
I think it would geographically make sense. If the teams do start doing this, I don't think. But I wonder if you'll do it like, this is what I wonder, is if it'll be a lot of like, I don't know why I'm taking us down here. I guess because it's the future of spring ball and this is a spring ball podcast. But this is why I can't do the topics, man.
Do it. I like it. No, it's good.
I bet. And you can clip this and come back at me in a couple years if this has been approved and schools have adopted it. I bet you won't see a lot of like, Alabama and Auburn scrimmaging. I think it'll be like UCF will bring in FIU. They'll have them come up, and Alabama will bring in UAB, and you'll see a lot of like that. Like, they want the information, but they don't want it against like legitimate opponents.
I don't know that idea of playing USF would, I think, make it more competitive than informative. And I think they want it to be informative.
It would make it dangerous.
I don't know if you want a rivalry game in April for football.
How many UCF fans show up? If UCF says we're going to host a spring scrimmage against USF in the Bounce House on this date, does that stadium have 30,000 plus fans in it? Because I think
probably.
It does. Yeah. And there'd be a lot of USF fans who drive up too. And then coaches are just like, let's see what we have at wide receiver, and guys are trying to kill each other on the field. Like, I feel like that's just not like the vibe they'd be looking for.
Yeah, I don't know if that, and also there has to be, when you're doing that, obviously you're doing it in a partnership. And I don't know, it would feel weird to be all like cordial and partnershipy with USF to like schedule practice together or like schedule a scrimmage together.
That's why it made sense when it was Syracuse and Colorado, two programs who could not be more geographically and culturally different. That being said, Syracuse has to fly over Colorado to get to a conference mate, but still, is what it is. But yeah, I just think it's funny that spring games, like all of college football, just agreed in 1 year we're done with spring games, and then immediately Dion was like, "Actually, I have a new plan," and now that's probably what it's going to be going forward. But for our purposes for this, we're not going to see that. But yeah, it's weird. I want to see, like, you just can't win. If the wide receivers look good, this prompt the DBs. If the DBs look really good, this prompt the wide receivers. That's just kind of the boat we're in.
You want it to be a perfect 50-50 give and take.
No, because that means they're just both bad.
No, it could mean they're both good. That's your attitude. That's your problems coming into here, because it could also mean they're both good. Just some good competition.
I do. If I remember right, I don't want to say it. I want to make sure I'm not misremembering. I seem to remember in spring and fall in 2017, like the defense was really taking it to the offense early on, and then by like the end of fall camp, the offense was just slicing into pieces, and they were like a little worried. And then the season started, and they were like, "Oh no, we just have like 8 of the best players in school history on the team at the same time." So
I don't remember specifically, but it sounds like it could be right. I mean, coming out of 2016, obviously the 2016 season, the defense was way better than the offense. So at a certain point, I wouldn't be surprised if the best offense we've ever seen did take over things and start running practices a little bit more. But
speaking of defense, we haven't really talked about defense on this podcast, and I think part of it is just there's fewer question marks there.
Yeah, and I think am I wrong in saying this? I might be. I think in a lot of cases, and especially if it's just like a regular practice with some individuals or some 7-on-7s or whatever, those drills always favor the offense. Like it is always much easier to have success offensively. And so, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot we will learn from the defense other than maybe some of the same things, like who's in the mix for the 2 deep, kind of what the defense looks like structurally and schematically. I don't know. Like, other than that, I mean, there will be big plays. There will be incompletions. It's kind of, a lot of it's going to be dictated by the offense. But I also just don't think there's as much to talk about with the defense, which we could be wildly wrong. We could be proven, scarily wrong. But
the biggest thing is where, like, is the D-line really what we were anticipating it being? Are there DBs we haven't really talked about who are rotating in a ton? But I do think it's also true that for a general football viewing audience, and I've often felt this way, it's like I think the average football fan watches offense. And I think that if, like, you're at this scrimmage, like, it won't be the defensive line collapsed on Miles Montgomery. It will be Miles Montgomery didn't get any yards, is where the fans' brains will be. So, like, I don't know. It's tougher for a defensive player to stand out and catch a fan base's attention outside of, like, getting an interception than it is for pretty much every offensive guy can do something where fans will then be talking about them after the keep calling it a scrimmage. You're infecting me with it now after the practice.
I've been, like, for the last 3 weeks, just solely being like, yep, can't wait till the scrimmage. And then I realized 5 minutes after we started the podcast, wait, did they ever say it was a scrimmage? Actually, 1 second. Let me look at something on my I wrote on my calendar, I wrote UCF scrimmage. So
you've just been speaking it into existence.
Apparently.
I can't wait for us to get out there and for us to be like, you know what, I'm feeling a scrimmage today.
Let's get the competitive juices flowing. Speaking of Frost, I think the last thing we haven't really touched on that I wanted to talk about, that I don't have any real inclination that we're going to see what this looks like, but the pace and kind of what the offense looks like under Frost this time around. Obviously, last time we remember it being like, we remember it so fondly, but it has been 8 years, right, since we've seen Scott Frost coach UCF.
That's about right.
And obviously, he's been on another stop, then had a brief stint in LA with Sean McVay and all that. I'm just curious to see what the pace looks like, what things generally, what his offense looks like these days. And I think that was one of the things we talked about when we started our spring ball talk weeks ago now, of what are the biggest questions heading into spring ball. This is going to be our first chance to see with our own eyes what that looks like.
Yeah, it has been 7 years and 3 months since we will be in the stands watching a Scott Frost coached UCF team when we were out there for that, which
That's
is
exciting.
pretty weird to think about, because I don't know, it just doesn't. I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting old. Maybe this is how it's always going to feel. But like, you tell me if you're listening and you're old. Like, it's weird to me that like 2017 still feels like modern UCF era to me, but it really just wasn't recent anymore.
No,
I don't know. Maybe it's just because I was around. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I still feel that way. Because to me, like, when would you, if I asked you right now, when is the start of the current UCF just general era we're in? What year would you say?
Oddly, I was going to say 2023 because
Really?
I was like 12.
Oh, you know what? That's a good divider. Okay. For me, maybe I'm just basing it on uniforms. I don't know. There's just this giant divide in UCF history, and it's before and after 2015. Like, I don't know. It just felt like everything dramatically reset, not just for football, but for athletics. And like, there's always been this big divider of it's like 2015 happened, and there's everything before that, and there's everything after that. That's like our BCAD for UCF athletics.
I have another answer, and this is just popped into my head. I feel like this current era, and this is probably, I agree with you, and that it's like 2016 to present is like, I think is how I view things. And part of that is because I became a student in 2016.
I was a student in 2015, so I'm not.
Yeah, that's true. Yes. But part of it, I almost wonder if it's like post-COVID. Like you think of 17 to 19 being such a golden age, being, the back-to-back undefeated regular seasons, 2 New Year's Six appearances, a top 25 season in 2019. Then you have things fall apart during a COVID season in 2020. Then there's a new coaching staff where things never really got off the ground. So it's like before COVID was the last time we felt really good about UCF football.
UCF is 34-28 since COVID-19 happened.
Bad.
Yeah,
like that.
It's weird because I don't want to boil it down to that because we know a lot of the factors that have led to where things are at. But it is true that it's so funny you brought this up because I was having this conversation with myself like last week. I was thinking about
that sounds really funny.
I was
talking back and forth to yourself like in opposing viewpoints.
I could reveal a really bad thing about me on this podcast, but I will sometimes, like, if I know I want to talk about something on the podcast, I'll talk it out. I think it
makes sense
before we do the podcast. Like, I'll just go for a minute.
I don't know if I do that as much. I just kind of sometimes when you live by yourself, you just like, you got to talk, you got to have some noise going. So like, I don't know if it's singing, if it's just
I assume most people who live by themselves speak to themselves. I talk to myself. I didn't.
Let us know in the comments below.
Yeah, let us know in the comments. Do you talk to yourself? Just give us a heads up if you do. But anyway,
be like, no, that's so weird. You guys are insane, strange.
I know that's a thing. I've talked to people who live alone, and they all speak to themselves. But maybe they don't rehearse a podcast to themselves, but they do speak to themselves. But I was thinking about this because it's so funny you brought this up because I was thinking about this, that it's not like COVID happened and now UCF can't field a football team, but following 2019, it was like, I remember putting up a tweet and all the storylines were like the 2010s were the decade where UCF arrived. Like they won, how many conference championships did they win? They won 4 conference titles, right? 2010, 2013, 2017, 2018.
2014.
Yeah, I missed. Yeah, they won 5. You're right. I missed 2014. Off the Holman, off the Rashad Perriman. Yeah, I mean it was. So yeah, and it was 5 conference titles. It was how many ranked seasons? 2010, 2013, 2017, 2018. 4 ranked seasons. 2 top 10
2019,
seasons.
Right?
2019. Yeah, they were. I don't. Thanks, Bailey. I'm crumbling here.
No, if you see, the thing is, you're doing most of the work, and I'm looking like the smart one because, like, if I had to list all these, I would have forgotten one. But
so from 2010 to 2019, 5 conference championships, 5 top 25 seasons, 2 top 10 seasons, 2 major bowl wins, 3 seasons with 12 plus wins. It was just like, and they had an 0-12 in there too, but it was just like everything. But that even raised the stakes because it was like we went 0-12 and it didn't matter. It affected the trajectory of the program in no way. So it was just like this big arrival point. And I don't know. Like, I think, and we kind of thought UCF was set up for a big 2020 and COVID hits and UCF leads the nation in opt-outs and they have this mess of a season. And it was just this big, like, momentum stop. Like, all of that just kind of got chucked out the window because it just sort of, and it wasn't just that COVID happened and they led the nation in opt-outs. By the end, within a month of that season ending, Danny White is gone. Josh Heupel is gone. And it's just like, everything just came to this screeching halt. And it's now been 4 years of just trying to, like, we're going to get back to it. And it's just never happened.
I'm sad, man.
Yeah.
It's not, no, I'm sad.
UCF was so unstoppable. It took the greatest global pandemic in 100 years to take them down.
You know, this is getting worse. This is getting worse and worse by the week, apparently, because we talked last week about UCF's ceiling not being what everyone maybe thought it was.
Don't do it. Point. People are mad about that. Don't do it.
I know, but so we talked about that last week, and then now this week we're like, wow, we haven't actually really been happy for the whole 2020s so far.
But even then,
there's no like clear path to it getting back to anywhere where it was previously.
But all that, I don't think it's never going to be back to where it was previously because the game is different. Like, never again is a UCF season going to end with an O in the loss column. That's never going to happen again because college football has changed. I don't know if you will ever see a team go undefeated in college football again. I mean, we literally just, one of the things we didn't even talk about is we had a 2-loss champion this year for like the first time in a billion years. And it wasn't even a talking point to people because that's just kind of how the sport is now. So it's like things have changed. You're looking confused.
What's the most games you can play now? Like, what is it undefeated? Is it
17 games 17 is the most you can play. Yeah.
That'd be, well, if you're undefeated, you're probably going to you're going to have a bye, right? So you'll probably be 16-0.
Yeah, but you can absolutely, again, but the idea would be 17 is if you play for and lose your conference championship and still make the playoff and then go to the title game, which isn't like a super impossible scenario.
Right. I'm just saying to finish undefeated, the only way you could do that is you're going to be 16-0.
But it's not, you'd have, but again, that's happening less. It's not just like, oh, there's a 12-team playoff, so teams don't go undefeated now. The conference is consolidated. They were not playing schedules like this. Like the SEC has changed they added 2 big brands and they changed their schedule so everyone plays everyone all the time. It's not like Alabama just counts on, yes, we get to play, or whoever, like Florida's like, yeah, we get Vanderbilt every year. The Big Ten added major brands and did the same thing. The Big 12 added new teams who were all very similar and did the same thing. Like the rotating schedules without divisions, it's just impossible now. Like everyone plays a harder schedule. So yeah, the era of UCF just cooking everyone on their schedule, I think we all know that's not coming back. Yeah. I think what the fans want is to be relevant in the Big 12 and at the national level. And I think that was felt more attainable even a year ago when they moved up and went to a bowl in year 1 and beat up on a top 25 Oklahoma State team. And it just feels a million miles away right now because they were just a doormat this year. And I want to roll back a little bit of what we said last week. I don't think anything I said is wrong. I just think that it was perceived as like nothing to hope for. Sorry. And it's just that 2017 is never coming back because that year is gone. And that doesn't mean UCF can't become nationally relevant. It's just that there was a time where we were sitting here going, yeah, the goal is that we are eventually going to win national championships. And I'm sorry, but that's not going to happen. And that's not UCF's fault. That's not Danny Whiteliff. That's college football has changed wildly. The Big Ten and SEC, there used to be a Power 5 and a Group of 5. The Big Ten and SEC now run the sport. It's written into the upcoming playoff contract that starts in 2026. They can kind of do whatever they want. They're holding more money than ever before. They're holding more power than ever before. They're stacking up the sport in a way where teams outside of those conferences are not going to be able to do that. Yeah. And in 2030, when the ACC stuff comes up, FSU and Clemson and all of them are also going to go to those conferences. So it's just like that's the reality of college football. And that doesn't mean teams can't be relevant outside those leagues. It just means the window's kind of closed to be one of them, to be like, yeah, Alabama and UCF in the same breath. That's just the type of thing that's probably not going to happen at this point.
Yeah. How did we get here from open spring practice? I don't even remember. Tell you,
don't have the first clue. If you're listening, maybe you can track it. Don't know how we got here, but yeah, very excited. We got to. This is what happens in the off seasons. I end up just getting very like, let's talk about the big picture. But
let's do it. I mean, that's what there is to do in the off season. There is only so much that you can dissect from 4 video clips that come out. As good as the video clips might be, like there's only so much to say, and we try to do our best to. I guess like we kind of just have a general template of what we want to talk about, and we'll just talk about wherever the conversation goes. And I like that about.
And that's why you love us, and that's why some of you absolutely hate us. But still listen.
Anything else?
And then tell us how much you hate us. But anyway, I do want to give a devil's advocate to my own take because I said I shouldn't have said that last week and then doubled down and made it sound even worse. I will say that if you're listening to this and you're like, God, I'm so sick of these guys telling me that my football team's never going to be the best team in America. The caveat is. The number one issue, like the number one divider at this point is money. And I do think that some UCF fans are really sick of, because for so long the talking point was, we'll just get to the Power 5 and you'll have money. Now they're in the Power 5 and it's like, oh, sorry, you have way more money, but the Big Ten and SEC doubled their money, so you're still behind. And there's a hope that rev share will maybe balance this. I think if you're rooting against the stuff I'm talking about, you need to root for the SEC to continue to stumble in football. They have the last couple of years. They haven't sent a team to the championship since 2022. Root for that. Root for the ACC as much as the Big 12. Root for Notre Dame. I know that's like against a lot of your blood, but it's like there needs to be – the divide can't keep growing because if it does, that's when that's going to all become impossible. And for UCF, money's always been the problem. They just don't have a lot of it. They unfortunately they don't even have like Cincinnati, Houston money. And they're just such a young school. And I've said before on this podcast that if you can just, because like there wasn't always a time like students who went to UCF in like 1994, not all of them came away being diehard UCF athletics fans because there wasn't always something to root for. Keep your fans engaged, have football seasons that are successful enough to keep bringing in new fans and having students on campus have those memories and grow up and remain UCF athletics fans. you're churning out tens of thousands of degrees every year. It takes a couple folks becoming billionaires in 15 years to change that. That's what's changed. That's why Texas Tech has gone from doormat to might win the conference. But the thing is, you can't just wait around and say, yeah, UCF is young, the money will come with age. That will happen. But students who went to UCF in 2004 and saw them go 0-11 and then left, they weren't locked in. They went on with their lives. Students who were here in 2017, they turned into rabid UCF football fans and stayed that way. You need to have the seasons to maintain that level of fandom.
And I'd argue it even goes beyond students. I think there are kids in Orlando and kids in Florida who watched and saw that season in 2017 who are now, I don't know if the math's working out on this, but they're getting into college now, I think, or maybe that already happened last year before. And I think that helps too. Like, you have to lay the groundwork somewhere. And I think we've seen guys or heard guys say like, oh yeah, I remember even coming in as recruits, like, oh yeah, I remember watching them go undefeated. Yeah. It being 7 or 8 years ago, they were just young kids at the time. So like, it can be more than just the student section, the students that are at the school at a given moment. And
yes, I think 100% right.
There's hope there too. So,
and the other important thing to remember is that it's not like, as bad as things have felt, especially this last year plus, it's not like UCF fell so far off that it's impossible. In 2022, they were a win away from hosting College Game Day again. In 2022, a month later, even after screwing that up and losing to Navy at home, they were 1 game away. They were like a quarter and a half away from going to the Cotton Bowl. And it was, and this past year, big noon kickoff against Colorado was a huge opportunity. The opportunities have not disappeared. That's the advantage that UCF has over other schools at the Power 4 and G5, G6. I think we're actually switching to G6 apparently.
Are we? Okay.
Because the Pac-12 level that, just aren't those type of schools. It's like the potential is always there. It's just these last few years, the folks in place just were never able to take advantage of that. So you hope those opportunities remain. I think they will. And just when the stage presents itself, when the spotlight presents itself, you just hope that you hit on that. And that's what it takes.
Yeah. And I think kind of where I want to leave, the last thing I'm going to say in excitement for Saturday and just kind of getting out to see UCF again under Scott Frost. I felt like, and I said this a couple times, and it was literally just because I think they were losing and because I was just so tired of the direction they were going in under Gus. It just felt like I had kind of lost my UCF, or like the UCF that I loved and remembered. And I'm like, it's never going to be the same. Like we've talked about that. Like I'm not just automatically, we're not back in 2017, but I think there's a higher chance now under this coaching staff and kind of restarting a new era that it can feel like our UCF again. And the whole program identity thing where it felt like it became all about Gus Malzahn, not necessarily because he wanted it that way, but that's just kind of how it was. It can now be, I think, about UCF again. And then you have a coach who loves UCF, loves Orlando. And I don't know. I'm excited to kind of restart on Saturday.
It's a powerful thing, potentially. Maybe this will all fail. I got to tell you, and this is not a topic for this podcast, recruiting has been interesting. And I do want to talk about it because it looks night and day from how it looked under Gus.
I have 2 commits in the news. As I was writing these down, I had the same thought, and I thought that's a podcast topic in the next few weeks.
I love how we're always locking. Do you think the podcast would be better if we disagreed on more things?
I don't know. I think it would be more annoying, but I don't know. Some people might find us annoying as it is. So
I have been considering, and I have a couple people in mind. I know some folks who are not big on one Johnny Dawkins, and I've been considering after the Crown asking someone to come on and have a little talk about it and see how it goes. But I don't know.
You have to remove me from the conversation. I can't look at it objectively.
I got to identify who the best person would be for that, but I'd like to do that. But I do. What I was
going to swarming our replies. I'm like, pick me, I'll do it.
Well, I do think it could potentially, because I like having that discussion, and I fear that I'm running out of time to have it. And I think that it does. We are so in line on how we think about that. I feel like sometimes we could serve the audience better by letting the other viewpoint breathe, but I'm also not going to just be like devil's advocate and completely change my opinion. Yeah. What I did want to say is it is a powerful thing to have a coach that loves the school he is at and loves being there. And it's a thing that is exceedingly rare in college football. And UCF is one of the few schools that does legitimately have that right now. Now, I don't think that automatically translates to wins. Right. And I don't want to get let's act like this is Rudy. This is a business. But I do think there's something to that, to having a coach who doesn't just want to be here. But because I think to Scott Frost, he understands the odds were not in his favor to end up here after the way things went down, to somehow end up back at the place that he loved, getting to do what he loves in a city he loved being in and raise his family here. And I think there's a power to that, and I hope he can leverage that and leverage the support that the fan base has for him and the shareholders have for him and try to turn this into something special. And, you know, I could be way off base here, and I'll knock on wood when I say it. You never know what's going through someone's head, but it's like, let's talk best case scenario for a second. Like, let's go in that direction. Let's say UCF has a shockingly good year under Frost. They go like 8-4 this year. They win a bowl, 9-4. All the momentum's there. They bring a bunch of guys back. They have a special year next season. They win the Big 12. They're the Big 12's representative to the playoff. Maybe they win the first round game or something and go down in the quarterfinals. Everyone's happy. If, you know, Florida State comes calling because they've run out Norvell, I just don't see Frost leaving a second time that quickly. I just don't see it. And maybe I'm totally wrong, but it would be counterproductive to not just what we see publicly, but pretty much everything we've heard privately. So I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, he set the high bar, and obviously it can just be words and very quickly if the right offer comes in. But he set the bar pretty high when he said in his reintroductory press conference that what was the line about that sometimes when you're climbing the ladder of success, people forget to tell you to stop when you're happy. And he's supposed to be like, he's happy at UCF, right? So, you know, we'll see. We'll see how everything plays out.
I think another factor that's changed is, one, keep in mind, he left for Nebraska. He didn't leave for any old school. And obviously he's talked about the personal circumstances occurring at the time that kind of made that decision he had to make. And I'm not saying he wouldn't have left for, like, listen, if like Nick Saban had retired and been like, Scott, you're the guy to replace me, he would have been like, bye UCF. Like, we all get that. But at the same time, I think one other factor that's changed from 2017 is it's a different thing when you're he's older now. When you're a young hotshot coach having a great year, it's a different thing to be like, yeah, I'm going to stay at this group of 5 school that's never going to give me the resources of a power program, never going to pay me what a power program can pay me. And yeah, UCF is not a Big Ten SEC team, but Frost can still stay here and make a lot of money, a lot more than if UCF were still in the AAC. He still has access to resources, more resources than in a lot of college football. Like the ground has shifted in UCF's favor in that way, where things were, it felt more insane in 2017, the notion of him just staying here than it does now since they're in the Big 12.
That is true. Yeah. All right. Let's jump into the football news real quick. There were 2 new commitments as of this past week. 2026 cornerback Elijah Keys and 2026 offensive lineman Keziah Charlton, both committed to UCF. Do you have anything you want to say on either of these guys, or do we want to just save kind of the whole recruiting conversation for maybe a couple weeks from now?
Yeah, we'll do it in a separate podcast. I don't want to like give away my takes on it now. It's like, it's just hilarious to look at the class where it is now with 3 commits and how 2 of them aren't even rated by 247, and the highest rated player would be like dead last in most of Gus's classes. And I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily we'll save it for the podcast. I don't think it's alarm bells. I just think it's a gamble, and I'm curious how it goes.
Yeah. Other thing, the UFL season started. UCF has 5 former Knights on UFL rosters, including the Birmingham Stallions with Cole Schneider and Marlon Williams. Jacob Harris and Donald DeLahaye are on the San Antonio Brahmas, and Sam Jackson is on the Houston Roughnecks. We'll jump into game of the week, which will be UCF men's basketball. They are 17-16, 7-13 in the Big 12. They are starting their journey in the Crown tournament. They're playing against Oregon State, who is 20-12, 10-8 in the WCC. That game is Tuesday at 5:30 on FS1. Winner of that will face the winner of the DePaul Cincinnati game on Thursday. So hopefully it's a long run. I would love to see that, but we'll see. With a lot of players entering the portal, and I think last time on the podcast we mentioned Keyshawn Hall declaring for the NBA draft. Since then, he has now entered the transfer portal. And UCF transfer Keyshawn Hall has heard from UCF in his recruiting process. So that's been out there. All right, tweet of the week.
Tweet of the week, really quickly on the UFL topic. This is not tweet of the week. It is a tweet. Did you see Donald DeLahaye's field goal attempt?
I did not.
He horrifically missed a field goal, and which happens. And for some reason, the official UFL on Fox account made fun of him for it. Like, they posted the video, which is unusual, and said just a bit outside, and with a laughing emoji. And everyone was like, "What the hell?" But anyway, tweet of the week. Tweet of the week goes to a collection of tweets that were tweeted, mainly because I tried to find them from when I saw them a couple days ago and couldn't, because I don't remember what they were in replies to. As you mentioned, Keyshawn Hall declared for the NFL draft and then said, "By the way,
NBA draft." Did I say NFL?
No, I said NFL. You said NBA. I'm just an idiot. Keyshawn Hall would probably not do well if he declared for the NFL draft. He's also probably missed the deadline by quite some time. But he is trying for the NBA draft. He then shortly after that said, "Just in case you think there's any chance of me coming back, not so much. I'll also be hitting the transfer portal." He did say he heard from UCF. I don't know. Maybe Dawkins was just like, best of luck. What I want to call out tweet of the week too was that there were more than a couple UCF fan accounts I saw who said things along the lines of Keyshawn Hall tweets on Keyshawn Hall hitting the portal and UCF fans going, "This is why Dawkins must go." And I found that funny. I found it even more funny when Matt Murschel reported that he has received offers upwards of $2.5 million from other teams, which back in the napkin math tells me that might be more than UCF spent on its whole roster this season. I think a lot more potentially. And I'm not here to do the Dawkins rant again. I'm here to tell you guys. I'm just here to try to ask you guys to wrap your heads around the fact that if and when UCF makes a coaching change of the basketball coach, which will very likely be either at the end of this season or the end of next season, I pray for you if you think that the portal movement of this team is going to stop because that happened. There are ways UCF can be better at basketball. Retaining their talent is not one of them. Rev share should help. We've talked about that on past podcasts. So there's going to be a cap now on what teams can spend on their rosters for all sports. $20.5 million for all of athletics. Obviously, the bulk of that will go to football. Couple points here. We talked about how, NIL is supposed to be legal now. Like you can't be, they have to be market value deals, and how I'm curious how that's going to go. We've already seen how it's going to go because Ross Dellinger had an article this week that some of the power football teams, like who also have good basketball programs, finally put together that the way they set up this cap means that Big East teams like Villanova, who don't have football programs, can give like triple the money to their basketball rosters.
Villanova does have a football program, but
real football programs. I apologize.
UCF played them last year, so
yeah, but you know what I mean, like FCS.
Yeah.
The schools that were football is not a revenue driver,
right? Yeah.
Which is a lot of the Big East programs. Like St. John's can just be like, cool, here's $20 million to our basketball team. The article spoke with, interestingly, had quotes like on the record, even from some ADs being like, we might have to cheat, like only way it's going to work. So already that's kind of going out the window. But just if you're a UCF basketball fan, excuse me, I forgot that doesn't exist. If you're a UCF football fan who occasionally checks in on the basketball team, just keep in mind that the portal movement ain't going anywhere. That's not changing if you change the coach. That's just the reality of UCF's financial situation. And honestly, I don't want them taking – I'm scared for how rev share is going to work. I don't want them taking $1 from football right now that can go to basketball, and I think you probably agree with me, so that's just going to be the way things are.
Yep. That's about right. Cool. All right, we'll get out of here then. We will be back next week with episode 263. We'll be talking about our observations, takeaways, anything from Saturday's open practice, not open scrimmage, open practice. But until then, you can find us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at ByCA Simmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. Thank you guys so much for being with us. We will talk to you soon.
Bye, everybody.